Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes or Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I am your host. And today I am sitting down on the interweb, so to speak, with Jerod Foster. If you don't know Jerod Foster, you may want to visit episode 3 of this podcast where I interview him for the first time. And in that podcast, we talk more about him and his career and what he does with the adventure media class at Texas Tech University. But on this episode, I wanted to focus on something a little bit different. In addition to all of that, he is also a husband and a father, and I'm also a father to 2 girls, and it's obviously something that's very important to me. And the main topic of this conversation is basically being an adventurous parent slash husband, partner, whatever. If you are a parent, then hopefully you'll be able to get something out of this episode. Jerod juggles a lot between his work, his travel, and being an adventurous father. And I know that it's something that he works at. And in my opinion, he does very well. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to come on and share just his perspectives, his thoughts, how he does it, and have a conversation about being a father and being a husband, and also, you know, taking care of yourself, having some time carved out so you can go on your own adventure or just go on a bike ride to hit that reset button. Anyway, I think it was a great conversation. I got a lot out of it, and I hope you do as well. And again, if you haven't listened to episode 3, you might want to check that one out either before or after you listen to this one. He's got a lot going on. I feel fortunate to call him a friend and somebody that I look up to, and I appreciate him taking the time to come and share on the podcast today. Okay, before we get to the episode, a few quick things. The Kick Coronavirus in the Teeth sale is still going on. We've had a lot of orders, so I think a lot of y'all are getting some retail therapy, which is great. Appreciate all the orders. If you haven't yet, all you have to do is head over to bikesordeath.com. Everything in the store is 19% off for as long as this pandemic is going on. So to take advantage of that, just use C19 in the coupon code box and watch those dollars just melt away. Just want to thank everybody for your support. If you would like to also support the show, there's a lot of ways you can do it on bikesordeath.com. You can there's links to everything. The main way you can support the show is through Patreon. If you go over to Patreon, type in Bikes or Death, you can support the show for as little as $1 a month. We send you some free swag, and you are in our hearts and minds forever. You can also just send a one-time donation via PayPal. If you think that this or another episode is good and you're like, hey, that was a good one, let's throw this guy a couple bucks. That's always great. And lastly, the easiest thing you can do is go to iTunes and leave a review of the podcast. I know I say it every time, but that is because it is that important. So if you'll take a few minutes, head over there and leave a review. It is greatly appreciated, and it helps other people find the show. All right, well, that's all I got. Let's get to the show.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends, or you could be alone. You ride for a day, or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You let that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes or death. Bikes or death. Podcast.
All right, everybody. Today I have Jerod Foster back on the Bikes or Death podcast. If you've been listening along, he was one of the first guests at number 3. And I was actually doing the math, Jerod, and this is going to come out as number 43.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So we've had a couple since the last time you and I got to chat. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's a crazy time in life right now, so Thank you for taking the time and coming back to chat with me.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Well, so I've started something new just recently called the Getting to Know You round. So I'm starting off the episodes with just 5 questions that are kind of fun or just get an idea of who you are. So why don't we start out with what you do for a living?
Okay, I am a professor of practice in the College of Media and Communication at Texas Tech University out here in Lubbock, Texas. And what that means is I'm a photography and visual storytelling professor that also has a professional practice, and that professional practice is used in the classroom quite a bit. So I am a professional photographer. I shoot a lot of editorial and commercial stuff for publications like regional publications like Texas Highways and Texas Parks and Wildlife Magazine, and news stuff for people like the Texas Tribune, the New York Times, all the way up to commercial stuff for any different client. A lot of my stuff revolves around the outdoors, outdoor recreation, conservation, and land stewardship. So I do a lot of work for the Nature Conservancy and folks like that. So I've got 2 different jobs really. One as a professor and one as a photographer, but they dovetail pretty nicely together.
You and I are both fans of Chumba.
Yep.
I think you're up to two Chumbas right now, right?
Yes.
Which ones do you have?
I have a steel Terlingua, their gravel bike, and then I have a new Sendero. And I just got that Sendero a couple months ago.
All right, so if you had to pick only one, which one would you go with?
The Terlingua. Yeah, I mean, I love the Sendero. It's hard because they're both fantastic bikes, but I can take that Terlingua on just about any trail I want to ride on, and plus it's a long distance bike. I mean, it's so comfortable.
A hobby outside of bikes.
I play a lot of guitar. So I used to tour in a kind of a country rock band for about 6 or 7 years while I was in college and a little bit after college, and I don't do that anymore. So I suppose that instead of saying I'm a professional musician, I can say I'm a hobbyist musician.
Okay, one thing I always noticed about you, and I thought you were actually misspeaking at first, but I believe the phrase you use is make a picture.
Make a picture, yeah.
Instead of take a picture. And I think I might know the answer, but why do you use that phrase make a picture instead of take a picture?
I think philosophically it means that you're not creating just an object, or you're not just taking something for the sake of photography or your own enjoyment. Making implies that there's thought and intention, care towards the subject. We can get pretty heady on that, but it in all honesty, it boils down to language. But at the same time, it's I'm very careful to say make, because I think it provides the proper and appropriate intention for the photographer to be considerate and to make something different and more unique and maybe more compelling than somebody that's simply taking a picture.
Right. Like I take pictures.
I've seen your stuff, man. You're getting better.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I have been practicing. It's a fun, and I mean, going with you and all your adventure media students. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody had a nice camera, and I was there with my iPhone. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay.
Well, you can make pictures with an iPhone too. I mean, it's all about intent.
I know. Yeah. All right. Well, this is going to dovetail kind of into our conversation today, but why don't you tell us about your family? Who all?
Yeah. So
who's in your family?
Yeah, sure. There's 5 of us total in my immediate family. My wife Amanda, and I have 3 daughters. Eva is the oldest; she's 8. Lola May is the middle child; she's 6, and then we have a 2-year-old. Her name is Emmy.
Sorry, your oldest one is how old?
She's 8 years old.
And that's the one that you just did the bikepacking trip with?
Correct. Yeah, we did a overnighter on the Capital Canyon State Park Trailway, and so we biked from South Plains, Texas, which is on the top of the Llano Estacado, which is a pretty flat piece of the southern high plains. And then we biked down off the Cap Rock to a place on this old trail. It's a converted railway. We biked 13 miles into a place called the Clarity Tunnel, where a lot of Mexican free-tailed bats migrate during the year. And we camped outside of it. And then the next day we did an out and back. So the next day we woke up and rode back up the Cap Rock. But yeah, she's 8 years old, and this was her second bikepacking trip. Actually, all of the kids have been on a bikepacking trip, but not that long. So,
wow. I thought she was older, man. That is really impressive.
8, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so 8, 6, and 2?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so this is actually something I've been wanting to talk to you about for a while, is the fact that you are a very busy person in terms of your work life, and but in addition to that, you also have a wife and 3 girls, and I know for a fact that you are engaged with them and you're recreating with them. Mm-hmm. And so really wanting to talk to you about how you balance your work, family, and personal life, and kind of, do the best that you can. I think that's all we can really do. But I'm now a single dad of 2 girls. I have a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old. Being a father obviously comes first, but there's a lot of other things in my life that are important that I think bring value to my life. So I'm always seeking that balance, and it's always a not a struggle, but it's a ever revolving thing to try to get that balance. So that's the main thing that I wanted to talk about today. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about what's going on with COVID-19 and how it's impacting the way that y'all are recreating right now. So I've been time-stamping everything. Okay. Today is Saturday, March 28th, and I think it's important just because things are progressing so quickly that, we should have that as perspective for this conversation. Yeah, so how are y'all doing with the COVID-19 and stuff?
Right now it really hit us 2 weeks ago. That was when we usually at the beginning of that week, I'm gone teaching a class during our spring break class, the adventure media class. When the university canceled all university sponsored travel, that put the kibosh on that trip. And so, it really came on in full that week because I was here, and my kids and wife, they couldn't travel to their destinations because we just didn't feel like it was, responsibly appropriate for them to make long hauls in what seemed to be an impending thing, a big thing. And my wife is medical. She's a nurse by trade, and she stays up, in tune with a lot of what's happening, and she also is a nursing professor. So she's concerned about what all of this is going to happen for her students and her coursework and programming too. So anyways, we basically had to cancel all of our travel, and we stayed home, which is as frustrated as we were with the particular circumstances and our plans that we'd been looking at for months. I mean, the adventure media class takes a year to plan. There's really, for us, there was a silver lining in it all, that we got to spend time as a family together during a time when we typically don't have that time together. And so we've actually been pretty decent. We've found a balance of work. We kind of take shifts back and forth on the computer and attending to emails and jumping on calls and all that kind of stuff, and then just hanging out with the kiddos. And believe it or not, the weather outside of last week up here has been pretty phenomenal. And so we've spent a lot of time outside with the kids, and there's people during this crisis that are not doing as well, but we've just chosen to see the fortunate things that are happening in light of these kind of dire circumstances for us as a family. We've definitely been able to get out on bikes quite a bit.
You've been able to get what quite a bit?
Yeah, we've been able to get out on bikes quite a bit.
One thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of families and kids out riding bikes, going on walks, going on runs in the neighborhood. Like I've lived in this town 40 years, and I've lived in this neighborhood for 5, so I'm very aware of the traffic that I'm used to seeing. And it's gone up significantly. I'm curious if you're seeing the same thing in your part of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that's right across from the university, and we've got 2 pretty big, attractive parks for people to recreate in, really from different parts of the city, and there's gobs more people out. Obviously, people are now working from home. Unfortunately, some people have lost their jobs, but that does give them an opportunity to be outside more. People don't want to stay cooped up in their houses if they don't need to be, and outside is the best place to be. I was actually just thinking about this the other day, on a ride. I was thinking about like how outdoor recreation itself may not be the cure for COVID-19, but it might be the cure for the pandemic. In that there's people are not necessarily rediscovering, but they're taking opportunity that they didn't have otherwise to be outside, to soak in something different than their typical routine. And that psychologically that's got to have hopefully a positive effect on folks.
Yeah. Well, I had a similar thought. I mean, you mentioned looking at the bright side or the positive aspect. There's not a lot we can do to fight the virus other than really isolate and don't interact with other people. That's really the only tool in our arsenal. So once you've accomplished that and you're taking the appropriate measures, I've started to look at it on a larger scale and start to wonder what the long-term net result of this is going to be. I wonder how many of those people are going to reconnect with, exercise, the outdoors, riding bikes, and how many of those people will it stick with? How many people are going to rekindle relationships with their kids because all of a sudden we thought Netflix was unlimited, entertainment, but people are getting bored and they're like, okay, what do we do now? And I find that they're spending more time with their kids and they're going outside and recreating.
Yeah, I hope that continues. I've had a lot of conversations like that with neighbors that we'll see, and really, honestly, some close friends that we don't see all that often because of how much we are involved with work and travel and things like that. And I've been telling some of these folks, like, I hope whenever this kind of turns for the better, outside of what positives could come out from a medical perspective, from a personal and from a community perspective, I hope people start to see, and maybe it's because I'm starting to see this, that we don't need to overprogram our lives as much as we do now. You think back when we were kids, because we're roughly the same age. When we were kids, like, we just didn't have as many things to do. We had plenty to do, but we didn't have as many things to do, and we didn't also feel like we needed to do all of the things, right? And so, what this actually allows us to do is reorient our time around. It sounds cliche, but it does reorient our time around things that really do matter, and that's community, family, taking care of others, taking care of yourself. Some of those very primal things.
You touched on a lot of the things that I've been thinking, and I've been encouraging people to take this time without as many distractions to look inwardly and reconnect with yourself. And I think that's something that we don't do enough, and it's because we're just inundated all the time from every direction. And there's so many options and so many things we could be doing that, I wonder how many times people are really just, meditating or going on a long bike ride and really reflecting on their own personal values and stuff like that. So I think, I don't know, I'm hopeful that as a result of this, like we've been saying, that people will reconnect with some of those important value systems that maybe we've lost sight of.
Yeah.
We shall see.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, good luck to you and your family and everybody out there. I mean, I personally think that cycling and outdoor recreation is important to our mental and physical health, our just overall well-being. I know for me it personally is. And so and I've read everything I can find about recreating outside from experts, and it's still an approved activity because of, I think, the value that it brings to us as humans, the need to be out and using our bodies and exercising and getting those endorphins. But, I just want to say it with the caveat that you do so very responsibly. I mean, I can't, it's not my job to police the world or whatever, but, you mentioned your wife is a nurse, and so I'm sure that y'all are taking all the proper precautions and doing everything that you can to be socially responsible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the flip side of that too is, we got to be really careful on how we read into this whole stay home movement. I'm fully behind the theoretical intention on that, and I think a lot of people understand where that's coming from. For outdoor recreationalists, particularly cyclists and runners, hikers, that doesn't mean you. I think we sometimes read it as a like, you cannot leave your home. That's not what that means, or at least that's not how I'm interpreting it. That just simply means that stay local, right? Don't propagate or the potential for this to spread past any particular community, especially into the rural communities that lack the proper access to health care to deal with this. I think so many people's gut, kind of knee-jerk reaction to this was like, well, I'm going to go to somewhere where I'm going to go somewhere rural because I want to get away from it all, not knowing whether or not they had it. When Eva and I went bikepacking a couple weekends ago, we did not stop anywhere. I mean, the trailhead is an hour away from the house. We went to the trailhead. We got to the trailhead. We offloaded our bikes. We biked to our destination, camped, came back, loaded up, and came home. We didn't, quote unquote, stay home, in that we did travel somewhere, but we didn't interact with anyone. And I think that's, we have to be really, really smart and, like you say, socially responsible about how we recreate, because it's healthy for us. It's mentally healthy for us. It's viable for us because we're outside as opposed to cooped indoors, where this kind of stuff does spread and kind of harbors itself. But we got to be really careful, because I think a lot of people read that stay home, particularly outdoor recreationalists, and they think it's like an insult to them, or they get defensive about it. And I'm like, it's okay, it's good intention, but make sure that you're not just blowing it off to go somewhere. Make sure that you're doing so properly and responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that, and that's something that I wanted to talk about, because there is some discussion about recreating outside on the internet that I've seen, and I'm guessing you have as well. And I've had some conversations about the image that I put out on Instagram, and we all should know that Instagram is not reality. First off, but the problem is, I was talking to a friend, and the problem is that it's unfortunate that, you and I might have an informed perspective, and really be taking this seriously and going through all the hoops to make sure that us, our families, and our communities are safe. But there's other people who are getting their news from, Facebook or Instagram, and informing opinions about how the behaviors and the way that they should be recreating and what's okay and what's not okay. I'll just say, much like you, the other day I went for a ride, but I drove 30 miles outside of town and rode where there was absolutely nobody. And I don't think you have to go through that extreme, but I like to get away from people. And so
Yeah.
that's not really a hard thing for me to do. But I mean, I haven't been to a store in 12 days. I have extra gas. I have so much food. I have all the bike packing gear. I've been riding bikes for 40 years, and I've never been to a doctor or a hospital as a result of riding bikes,
Yeah.
So, I think the message that I can't control what everybody does, but I just want to highlight the fact that, you and I are choosing to continue to recreate. I'm taking my kids on bike rides, nothing crazy, but that is a valuable part of who we are. I think people should be exercising and doing all those positive things for their mental and physical health. But we are doing so within the guidelines of experts who are saying that this is okay activity. You're outside, big open spaces, keep your distance, don't interact with others, be safe, don't put a strain on the healthcare system, and it's okay to go and recreate and ride your bike. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that,
Okay.
I mean, that's the most important thing there is, probably during a time like this is just that relief of stress you get in being able to go outside, to get a little physical, activity going. It's, man, I mean, I mean, every cyclist out there, every runner, every hiker knows the benefit of that. And it doesn't have to be a 45-mile, dirt road ride that goes through, some crazy stuff. It needs to be some sort of activity outside that to release that stress. And yeah, I don't think anybody's arguing with that, and nobody's stopping people from that.
Well, I'm glad, and I hope that continues. I went for an hour ride last night just to clear my head, and I do that
Yeah.
most days or nights. Just, I mean, if it can be an hour to just get out and let some steam off and reset,
Yeah.
then great,
Yeah.
Well, good. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. There's a lot of conversation actually going around, obviously, so I wanted to touch on that. But let's go back to before the virus now, and hopefully after the virus. And this may be a very challenging question, or maybe not, but can you talk a little bit about how you personally balance your own work, home, and recreation life?
It's a full-on job in itself, I suppose. When I started thinking that I really wanted to be a photographer, I wanted to be a lawyer at first, and I really had no reason why I wanted to be a lawyer. I just knew I was getting an education that pointed me towards a law degree, and but when I started photographing, I started thinking about doing this professionally. I was very fortunate to train and kind of be a mentee under the state photographer of Texas, Wyman Menzer. I saw how active he was. I saw how passionate he was about not just work, but his work, and then I saw his work ethic, and that kind of rubbed off on me, and so I just stayed busy. That was before I really met my wife and started dating and all that kind of stuff. But when we got married, I was really ramping up just how busy I was behind the camera, and by that time I was already a part-time instructor in the college, and from that point forward, she kind of jokes to people. She's like, I've never known Jerod not to be working until midnight on something. and it's usually photo related. And I used to write quite a few books and so on and so forth. So there was always some sort of project work that came complement to my teaching, and then also just kind of our lifestyle. But when we started adding kids to the mix, it's not that that stuff got any less busy. It's just that the time got more compressed, and so kids. I mean, you know this, being a parent, and any parent hopefully knows this. Like kids, I don't like to be cliche and say that kids change your lives. Of course they do. I mean that's implied,
Right.
but they do they do make you refocus your time, for sure. And I'm very, very fortunate to have I mean, just the most awesome support system in the world with my wife. And she we had kids after a couple years of marriage. She saw how I was working, what I was working towards, basically how my work itself manifested throughout any given work year. And I did the same with her too. But when we started having kids, yeah, I think she and I both knew how we both were going to work around having children in the house and in our lives. And we, I don't know if there's any sort of secret sauce there. It's just that, we find our balance in being, I don't know what the right word is, but we find balance in being able to help each other and recognize whenever that help is really needed. Now that all being said, she might say something completely different, but I do feel like I get the benefit of it a little bit more than her, when it comes to working. And I've been able to turn a few different, what is considered a hobby by some people into a profession, and I feel very blessed in that. But she sees the same value in it, I think, as I do. And so she's really provided the support for me to be able to do the work that I get to do. And really that involves the travel, because that's the toughest part, is just being gone. Like last summer, I was home for 12 days.
Oh.
And yeah, and that's between teaching a 15-day field course down in the Texas Hill Country. I spent most of June on assignment, different places, New Mexico, different places in Texas. And then I spent all of July in New Zealand, teaching. And now Skype and Zoom and FaceTime, all wonderful technologies that make that much more approachable than not being able to talk to my kids and my family. But that's still pretty tough, and it's just simply the travel involved that is the time suck, in this kind of, maintaining the right type of relationships you want with your kids and family as a whole. But again, I don't. The secret sauce is just, my wife is the secret sauce. Like she's super supportive, but she also keeps me in line. She also keeps things in perspective for me. Hey, you need to change that kid's diaper. you need to take that kid out for an ice cream or something. When I don't readily recognize it, and that usually happens when I'm coming directly back from a trip. I'm having to shift modes a little bit, and she helps reorient me quite a bit.
Yeah. You said something that I wanted to highlight, which is you've been able to make your hobby and your job dovetail nicely together. I guess hobbies being, heck, man, you've used music, photography, cycling, and you've been able to incorporate all those different things at different times. And that's one thing that I've really been realizing myself as I started a podcast. The first time I ever recorded an episode was whenever we took a family trip up to North Carolina, and I interviewed Greg Hardy, and it was a light bulb moment that, I didn't go there specifically to interview Greg Hardy, but I can go with my family, we can do a trip, and then I can also, cut out a little bit of time for, some me time, something that I'm passionate about, and it's really opened my eyes to this idea, and honestly, your example has been one of the things that has helped inform this pretty greatly. Actually, is that no one's going to create the perfect job for you. There wasn't a adventure media class until you created it, right? So, I was talking to I was on a bike ride. This girl Amanda that I met, she's a Kona rep, and she was working a lot in sales for Kona. And one day she just went to her boss. She had this idea that, what if I traveled around the country and did demo events and tried to pick up new dealers all over the United States. And her company thought it was a great idea. They bought her a Sprinter van. Her and her husband and her dog now live on the road, going around and living a really meaningful lifestyle to them. And then also she's working, and I really congratulated her on that. Is like, I'm not, she identified that she wasn't really happy, and then she advocated for herself and was creative to figure out a way that it could all work for all parties involved, your family life and your work life and everything, kind of, I guess, getting it on the same page or as close to the same page as you can, so there's not as much contrast there.
Yeah, no, I have a unique job, as a professor, but especially as a professor of practice, one that obligates me to be a professional in the field in order to be successful in the classroom at the university, and kind of fulfill that role that the university expects of this type of professorship. And part of that means that I can be entrepreneurial, or still be entrepreneurial about what I'm coming up with in terms of class programming, but also how I direct my professional photography career and how that informs what I do there. It's I love cycling. I love it, but at the same time, I knew that if I was going to be spending that much time on the bike to justify simply just gone on the bike, right? I mean, every time you do a bike ride, it could be a couple hours, at least. And to justify spending that much time on the bike, I needed to figure out how I can, orient that towards work as well, because it was also taking time away from professional work, the photography work. Well, I mean, a lot of the work that I was doing anyway was outdoor recreation, outdoor conservation pointed anyways, and I got into cycling because of how it, one of the reasons why, how it oriented me towards the outdoors in a different way. So why not be able to use it as a professional tool as well? I joke to people every so often. I say I'm a professional cyclist. I don't race, but every now and then I have the chance to make a little money on top of the bike. But it's I don't know. I'm always searching for story. I'm always searching for a way to create, and I think that the bike has just been another perfect vessel for me to do that on. And the fact that it's something that people do as a hobby, which means my family would do it as a recreational hobby, it just kind of works out that we can all be involved with it, and even my career at different levels.
Where I've kind of landed is, if we're talking about work-life balance or work-family life balance, and then personal time, is I value, or I prioritize it as family first, job second, and me third. And me is me riding my bike.
Yeah.
In case anybody was wondering, I mean, that's my me time. But I truly know, it's not a belief at this point, but I know that going outside and riding my bike is a very valuable function in my life towards my mental and my physical health, resetting me, allowing me to refocus on being a family man and letting the pressure go from, whatever happened at work today. And I just wanted to get your personal thoughts on that, but I do prioritize riding bikes, and it's not just something this is fun. There is significant value there. And so it's not me neglecting my family. I think whenever I go for a bike ride for an hour or two, it's me taking care of myself so I can be fully present as a father and as a, husband. Well, not a husband right now, but people who are.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I like how you kind of give it a prioritization list or numbering. Whenever I got married, we had a conversation. We were at dinner one night, and again, we'd kind of found out our work rhythms, our professional careers, and we're young professionals at that point. And I told Amanda, I said, if Nat Geo called me tomorrow and said they needed me for 6 months, which they're not going to do, but if they did, I said I'd have to go, and I'd be gone for 6 months. And she said that's fine. She goes, I know that's part of one of the doors that you've kind of pointed yourself towards opening. And she said, but she goes, you just have to know that if I call and I have to, and I've got a kid on the line that's missing dad and needs to have a conversation with dad, or if I have a kid that needs to be disciplined, or if I just need to have a conversation, that you have to be present on the other end of that line. And that was our agreement. And it doesn't sound as meaningful when you just put it in words like that, and I'm sure it doesn't sound as meaningful when it's just kind of listened to in an episode, but that was super.
I'm taking it. I'm taking that very meaningfully.
Well,
as you're talking, I actually wrote down good communication with spouse. Just like really, I've failed at marriage, so I'm not going to give any marital advice. But one thing I've learned from being in all kinds of relationships is the value of communicating who you are, the priorities in your life, what your life looks like, the different doors that could possibly open, and allowing that person the space to be okay with that or to reevaluate if that's going to work for them. I've always felt like, just as humans or as a person, I always want to seek out the best information. And so if I'm looking to engage with a person and develop a long-term relationship with them, they need the best information possible so they can, figure out if that works for them. And if it doesn't, then it's not going to work in the long run. So let's not put a square peg into a round hole. So I got a lot of value out of what you said. I mean, having those very frank conversations.
No, that just translated to me as, I have to be around. And, I've, I guess, fortunately been mentored by people, professionally, like photographers that they really had to, had some rough spots in their familial relationships. And, I grew up with a pretty close-knit family on a family ranch. And, I had and still have a really, really great family, orientation, in background. And I want that for my family. And I knew that, compromise doesn't sound like the right word, but there has to be some comfort or tolerance for making compromises towards what's most important. And what's most important is simply being present when my family not only needs me, but when I need to be there, and need to be around them, and when I need them. And so it's there's we were talking about striking balance earlier. I mean, we have to strike the right type of balance. The right type of balance is established whenever you, like you put it so eloquently, when you establish the priorities in the right order. none of us are making. We're not we're not professional racing cyclists.
Right.
Whenever I'm on assignment and the bike is involved, I'm still a photographer first. So I might have to train to go do a 4-day, 5-day tour that I'm a part of, that I'm helping write a story on, but I'm also the photographer on. But I'm not training like a professional athlete, and devoting that much time to it because I can't. I've got to spend time
Right.
with my family. I've got to feed people. I've got to go teach. And then I've
Yeah.
got to hang out with my kids. And I'm just really really fortunate that what looks like a hobby for a lot of people, I've been able to embed in my professional career, really with everything that I've kind of picked up as a hobby, and uh,
Yeah.
and then but that also allows me to direct it around family activity as well. Uh,
Well, perfect segue.
mhm.
Let's talk about some of the trips that you've taken with your kids. I remember one in particular that you took, I believe, with your whole family.
Mhm.
And I remember just, you made an Instagram post about being under the night sky. So would you like to talk about a few of the different trips you've
Yeah,
taken your family on?
yeah,
And obviously you just took one with your oldest daughter. So yeah,
yeah.
I'd like to hear some of those.
Yeah, well, I mean, my wife is uh, she's a traveler. She's like a true traveler, and one that has the wanderlust that I think really feeds valuable travel experiences. She's not afraid to jump into anything new. She's not afraid to jump, especially into new environments and interact with new people. Um, and so she did a ton of traveling before we were even married, but she also traveled under mostly professional circumstances, um, because neither one of us grew up just flush with cash, so we had to make sure that our professional orientation allowed us to take advantage of travel. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I think with that intention in mind, we've really kind of oriented our family's travel around not just like vacation or recreation, but about having true purpose in the task, and getting value out of where we go and what we experience. We've done things as simple as uh, group. I mean, we just went on a group bike ride. I mean, that's travel last night, but to traveling overseas. I was teaching overseas in Scotland one year. I brought them to Ireland, and we spent 2 weeks just kind of rambling around Ireland and in and out of people's lives, and experiencing culture with the kids as they were really young. And fortunately, they still remember that. But I think that the trips that have been the most meaningful, especially most recently, are those revolving around the bike. The one you were talking about just now was an entire family bikepacking trip that we took uh, on the Caprock Canyon State Park Trailway. It's just an hour away from here, so it's really close and convenient for us. And I say an
Mm-hmm.
hour away is really close. It is for West Texas, but we we were we just decided one day, like, hey, let's just go take the kids camping. And I said, well, let's go on the trailway. At that point, everybody's riding a bike except for the youngest. She's in a Burley trailer, so we just load the mountain bikes up. We go to this 6 mile section of the trailway that we can access a kind of a midway point trailhead. Get on it, bike 6 miles in one afternoon, set up camp right outside of the Clarity Tunnel, on the trailway, and watch the wildlife, and listen to the wildlife, and eat a dinner that was really a disaster to eat, but that's just camping with kids and family, and really the disaster was my fault, but but we just had a great time. And then when we went to bed that night, we left, because we had the Burley trailer, we could pack our big tent, and we left the fly off the tent. It was warm that night, and the stars were out. And this is a place that gets super dark. I mean, it's not I don't think it's a dark sky designated area, but it should be. It's so dark. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and all the stars are out, and you can see through the mesh in the tent. And I look over, and our 2-year-old, which at the time she was not quite 2, she's just sitting up and staring at the stars, and nobody else is up. They're all asleep, and all I can see is a silhouette of her. And she's got a pretty defining silhouette because she's got a lot of hair. I mean, it's a fro, and so I see this just big ball of hair above everyone else. She's just sitting up and she's just looking at the sky, and I thought that was just the coolest thing. So I just, I watched her for a little while, and then after I kind of really got my fill of watching my kid and wonder over the night sky, I whispered to Amanda, and Amanda was laying next to her, and I said, "Hey, look." And so she got to see it just a little bit, and then Emmy then just laid back down next to Amanda, and I thought that, that was one of the most valuable things that I've ever experienced with my family, and especially doing something that I love to do with my favorite people in the world.
Yeah, while you were talking, I looked up a quote from Last Child in the Woods, which is a book I know you're familiar with. You actually brought it up on the first time you and I spoke on the podcast.
Yep.
And I went out and got the book, and I'll be honest, I stopped at chapter 8 because I have ADD, and there's a lot of great books out there.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I need to finish it. But the first page of the introduction says, within the space of a few decades, the way children understand and experience nature has changed radically. The polarity of the relationship has reversed. Today's kids are aware of the global threats to the environment, but their physical contact, their intimacy with nature is fading. That's exactly the opposite of how it was when I was a child. And that has really stood out to me. My daughter is learning about global warming and is very educated about wildlife and scarce resources, and part of this is because I've also been teaching her, but I've noticed that the school system is backing that up as well, and they have a much better greater understanding of the world we live in, but what's lacking is that connection to nature, and it's really up to us as parents to instill that in them. If you live in the city, you got a, backyard and you plant a garden or what, your experience with nature is very limited, and you're not going to get that perspective of the planet you live on unless you go to a place like Caprock Canyon and look up at the night sky at 2 a.m. and you can see everything. Yeah. And it really puts that awe in you, and I think puts us in perspectives, gives us humility, and then ties it into that understanding, that education that we have, but tying the two together. Any thoughts on that?
Last Child in the Woods was a huge transformational book in my life, and I think it was like the first book after I'd finished all of my education that I got to read for pleasure. Doing the kind of education I did, you kind of don't read fiction anymore. I love nonfiction, and I love sociology, and so that book really stuck out to me, but it really made me think about how much I took for granted growing up on a ranch. I grew up on a big cattle ranch near Fort Worth. My family's still there. We're able to go back home and hang out on the ranch, where certainly life is a much slow. It passes at a much slower pace, but it allows you so much freedom of movement, and it made me really value in a much more intense way all of the time that my older cousin and I used to just ramble around the ranch, or value the time that I was working with my grandfather or working for my grandfather, moving cattle around or hoeing weeds out in the pastures. I mean, stuff that seemed like menial labor that now I think back and I'm like, that really helped shape me in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways was was just that orientation towards the outdoors and to nature and the environment, and so that book drove home just how intensely valuable my life on the ranch was, and how much I needed to try to guide my kids towards having those experiences. And it wasn't just me. My wife values the exact same things just as strongly. And so, I don't know if she read the book or not, but we had conversation after conversation about it, and we decided like that's going to be something that we make sure we provide for our children, and not in a way where like we're ostracizing ourselves from other communities and our kids from other kids, because they need to have a proper social life and things like that, but in a way where it stands out as a priority for us as a family, to connect with nature and the environment in different ways. And you're exactly right. Schools are teaching their students, and it makes sense to do it at the elementary level, because that's when you can really start changing culture and perspectives on things moving forward, is if you bring them this great information early on. But you're exactly right. They know, they have all of the knowledge, but there's a lot of kids out there that have never walked a creek bed in a dry arroyo, in a state or national park somewhere. There's still a lot of kids that, with all their knowledge, they've never been beyond their backyard. Now, I will say though, like, being outdoors in general is one of the best things that you could do for your kids and well, for you in general. And so if the nearest access to nature is in your backyard, then great. And as long as you have that intention of experiencing it in a way that, I guess, kind of amplifies your proximity to nature, as opposed to just thinking, well, this is just the backyard. This is where I go to throw around a football. Which, nothing against that or anything like that, but it's just, it is different, and of course in Texas it's different, where we don't have a whole lot of public land, but there is a lot of open space, and so I think for a lot of Texans, and this may be true of a lot of people in the United States, the outdoors is what's just simply outside your car windows, as you're driving through an area. And we've just decided that that's just not enough, for us and our family. And it sounds like you've done the same thing with your kiddos, and I I'm around a lot of students at the university level who have been oriented towards the outdoors, either by parents or friends, or maybe activities that they get involved in at the university, and in a lot of them, in talking to a lot of them, I find out that a lot of them are prone to being active outside, to appreciating nature from a tactile perspective through the invitation from other people. And I want my kids, Eva's 8. She did her first, kind of her longest bikepacking trip without the rest of the family around her, at 8 years old. I want her to take that pretty unique experience for an 8-year-old and translate that into influencing another friend to maybe not do that, but to at least do something outside that is going to benefit them in the long run. And that, I mean, to me, that's how you kind of spread the love of the outdoors and outdoor rec.
Okay, I agree with that 100%. What I would also add to that, at least my perspective as a father, is I believe that doing something like that with your daughter or your son is going to help them on many levels, decision making, critical thinking, motor skills, all kinds of stuff that, you're developing as a result of just going out with some, I think the word is like unstructured activity. That's one
Yeah.
thing I learned from reading the book, is that recreation has become very structured. Many of us do it indoors, or there's playgrounds. And you and we grew up in just a different time. Like when I grew up, there was a creek behind my house, and we rode bikes all over town, playing in creeks, building forts. Every crazy thing, making not too safe ramps and getting hurt, and
Yeah.
and all that. But there's value there that you're learning as a kid. You're learning that when I do this, there's a consequence. But there's also a benefit too, like you were saying. There's a benefit of it. So it really creates, in my opinion, a well-rounded person that has a lot more depth than just, this is how we recreate. We go in the backyard, or we go to a playground, and that's it.
Yeah. And I think we're very fortunate. Our kids are healthy. There's nothing that we medically worry about with our children, and and we intend to keep them that way. We have the means to feed them in a way that promotes good health and all that kind of stuff. And to me, the biggest impact that outside of appreciation and stewardship of the environment is the biggest benefit of outdoor recreation like this with the kids is the mental health benefits and impact.
Yes.
You can monitor your kids physically and see how healthy they may be in a lot of different ways, but again, I'm at a university, and it's university students in general. Like, this is across the board. Nearly 30% seek some sort of counseling or guidance around mental health issues while they're at college. That's a significant percentage of students out there. And so my biggest the premise of Last Child in the Woods is fighting nature deficit disorder. And if anybody follows me on Instagram, you'll see that the first hashtag that I strategically put in the first comment, because that's obviously how you're supposed to do it on Instagram. But the first hashtag I put there is hashtag fight nature deficit disorder. And I mean that 100% every time I put it there. Like, it's given me, honestly, direction around even what I post on Instagram and what I seek out as a professional photographer and storyteller. I want things that inspire. I want to produce things that inspire people to take action towards fighting nature deficit disorder. Somehow, if it's travel, if it's being active outdoors, whatever it is, because when we do that, and there's, as you pointed out earlier, there's plenty of literature out there stating that time outdoors is a huge boon to mental health.
Right.
And I just feel like a lot of the students that I'm around that have had strong orientations towards the outdoors before they get into college seem to be more confident. They seem to have a path that they're passionate about, and they know that they're going to fail. They know that they're going to hit some bumps along the way, but they have sight. They have a way of forecasting what they're going to do with their passion. They're also more flexible. I mean, there's just a lot of things that come from just this intense exposure to the outdoors. That you're right that we tend to want to put into the schedule of things that we do, as opposed to making sure that we just spend time around it. And it's an odd thing that we do nowadays with our outdoor time.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on there was inspiring people to fight nature deficit disorder. And it's interesting, like we were saying, you and I didn't have to work as hard to experience nature, but as most of us live in cities and everything, all the parks have, all the natural areas to become like parks with manicured grass and, playgrounds with safety rules and everything all over them.
Yeah.
It's harder now as a father or parent to give your kids that experience, but we both identified how important that is. So, aside from inspiring people, how hard is it to be a father and take three girls on a bike packing trip
Yeah.
and all that, like
Well,
let's shed some real light on what it's like to be a parent and doing this kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think with everything, you just have to realize right off the bat that nothing is ever going to be perfect. And I think when you try to take your kids camping, especially for the first time, when you try to take them bike packing for the first time, you want to do it by some sort of recipe that you've seen cobbled together on Instagram by people that are not taking their families bikepacking, by the way.
Right.
It's these influencers that we're inundated with, which I love every one of them. There's a lot of great ones out there, and I follow some people that I think have a lot of value, produce a lot of value for our genre of activity and the outdoors and the environment. But it's their job to have everything dialed in, or to seemingly have everything dialed in.
Yeah.
The number one thing that I always have to keep in mind when I introduce my kids to something that I'm relatively proficient at is that it's really not ever perfect for me, so why should I expect to create a perfect experience for them when it comes to the technical stuff? I want them to have an experience that doesn't drive them away from doing it in the future. And so for our kids, it's really, I my wife, she tells me, like, look, the bikes are that's your job, so make sure that you've got all the stuff that you need to take care of all of the bikes, because now there's quite a few of them, and then she takes care of just prepping the girls on things, and we both work together and making sure that they've packed what they need. I mean, I don't know if this is getting too technical for you, but it's just, or too on the ground, but it's it's not like it's not dissimilar on going on a trip to the ranch back home. It's but it's just packing a few fewer clothes, and making sure that our girls are not expecting it to be maybe as comfortable or exactly like it is at home, but making sure that they do expect that it is going to be a fun experience. And that's the main thing right now, is making sure that they consider this to be more fun than it is suffer. And that's kind of the balancing act I wanted to play with Eva a couple of weekends ago when we did our trip together. It was, she was going to have to ride basically downhill for 13 miles, which was great in theory, and then 13 miles uphill the next day. And turns out that we rode into a headwind in sub 40 temperatures in misty conditions the first day, 13 miles downhill, and then we rode into a headwind 13 miles uphill the next day in nearly 80 degrees. So yeah, and so during those circumstances, it's all about just balancing and monitoring her mental state, if you will, during the time of the activities, and preparing them beforehand, like what it's going to be like, helps out quite a bit. And so in doing that, I could ask Eva at any time along the trail, like, how you feeling? She's like, I'm good, but that she's putting her head down and she just wants to get to the next braking spot.
Yeah.
And there were moments where it was like, hey, can we take a break? And I'm like, yes, we can. We're gonna bike up to that tree that you see 100 yards ahead of us. And she's like, why can't we stop now? And I always I want to have a spot that I can see that I want to break. Like, I want to get to that spot instead of just stopping right there. And I just kind of translated that to her, and it anyways, I'm rambling, but
No, this is
yeah,
good. I mean, that's kind of what I was wanting to kind of shed some light on is how challenging it is. Kids are going to get tired. One of them might have a poopy diaper. One of
yeah,
them's going to be hungry. One of them's got to go pee. I
yeah,
mean, there's always going to be challenges that come up. I mean, you can't control the weather,
yeah.
but I
But
think the
you can
message
control
is
your expectations though, and
right.
that's the
But
main thing. Yeah,
yeah, so I guess my personal thought is it is hard. It's not easy to be, to take kids out and do a 26-mile overnighter with an 8-year-old in, hard-ish, in conditions. But I think my experience is that the hardness is way outweighed by the positive aspect of the trip.
mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get your perspective on that, and also how are your kids responding,
Yeah.
to the whole of the experience, not the, oh, it's hard, it's cold, but to the whole of the experience. What kind of impact is it having?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say that knowing that all of your kids are very different is helpful.
Hmm.
None of my kids are the exact same. You might be able to hear one of them is like singing at the top of her lungs right now, and
Yep.
she's the one that's super different than her older sister, and that one doesn't necessarily like to go on long bike rides as much as the older one. So, knowing what how they are and who they are before we get into one of these kinds of things is pretty key. But at the same time, hopefully the result of what's going to happen, the impact that these kinds of experiences makes on them is pretty similar. Um, my my oldest daughter, I mean, she loves being outdoors. She could be, she's a little bit more of an introvert. She can spend time in her head, outside in the backyard, looking amongst the blades of grass, for all sorts of different things, and find joy in that for 2 hours at a time. And so when she goes on these kinds of trips, I see things happen in her that maybe aren't necessarily oriented around nature, but oriented around her thought process, and especially her confidence, and her the pride that she feels in her performance, and how that leads to performing even better, whatever better looks like, right down
Right.
down the road. My youngest, or my middle child, she is just a sponge for information and knowledge, and so while she may not necessarily enjoy the endurance component of it because she's 6, not
Yeah.
that's the main thing. While she may not necessarily enjoy that, and her legs get tired sooner, and she's also a pretty small child. She's not tall like her other one, sister. She can get done with something and just remember the experience so much more vividly than all of us. And as long as she has, like you put it, an experience where the the benefit and the joy and the information gain outweighs the suffer, she's all about doing it again. She actually we just recently picked up a hand me down mountain bike for her from a cycling buddy of mine, and I think having a bike that is now similar to her older sister's has oriented her now towards wanting to do this a bit more actively. So I would imagine
Yeah.
in the next couple of years, or year and a half or so, she'll be with Eva and I, doing some of these trips, and really even riding, more technical terrain. Both of them, we took them to the trails yesterday, and both of them are picking up the stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then
That's awesome.
my youngest, it's hard to tell. I mean, she's 2, she's just
Right.
turned 2, but I will say this: she, when you're the youngest kid, you notice amongst your children that the younger child always is influenced by the older child. Well, this one's influenced by the 2 older children, and she is always walking around the house with a helmet on saying, I want to go ride bikes. I want to go ride bikes.
Yes.
That's what she wants to do. And she finds joy in it because she sees it. The whole family sees joy in it. And, that's an impulsive response, but I'll take that over anything else.
Yeah, that's funny. My 3-year-old is very similar to that. Although my 10-year-old hasn't taken to the outdoors and cycling as much as I might personally hope. But again, it's about knowing your kid and fostering the things in them that make sense for them. And so there's lots of ways to expose them to the outdoors and stuff. But
I think my oldest, and again, that's true of just about anything, or I guess true of any one thing that a parent needs to realize about their kids is that, there are the parents that really will push their children into things and keep them pushed into those things for a long time. And, that can end up great, and it might not. The same thing with outdoor activities like this. But, if you allow your kids to see that it's a valuable part of your lifestyle, and it makes you a better person, it makes you a better parent, a better spouse, whatever it is, then I think they will pick up on that as well. I mean, I'm a huge believer in nurture over nature in some ways when it comes to kids, and like how we raise our children's it's what we're talking about, right? I mean, it's how we influence our children. And
we have an impact. We know that as parents. Now, I believe in nature as well, but we have an obligation, and that's what we're talking about. It is our responsibility. These are things that we know are important. They're valuable, and we have a responsibility to inform our kids about it. Because it's important, not just because it's something fun we like to do. It actually matters.
Yeah. Whenever my oldest daughter was born, we come back to that cliche. A lot of people say, "Well, children change your lives." When my oldest daughter was born, I truly knew what it felt like to say, I would lay my life on the line for this person. And if I'm willing to do that for any one of my children, the least I could do is also show them what is extremely valuable to me. And again, there's a lead by example orientation here. Through that, hopefully influence at least their perception and perspective towards being active outdoors. Maybe not necessarily be as involved as I am, but at least appreciate it, respect it, and find value in it.
There you go. Well, I think in summation, you and I are perfect parents, and we are doing an amazing job.
No, not at all.
I know. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I do want to segue into the next chapter of kids or young adults. You being a professor at Texas Tech, I had the honor and privilege of being able to attend one of your adventure media classes. Most people are going to know that I went on a trip with a group. It was March of 2018?
2019.
19?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, it was just last year.
Oh man, a lot's happened. Since then. You're right, it was last year. But I wanted to kind of take it to the next level when we're taking 18, 19, 20-year-olds, the range there, some of them with some outdoor experience, some of them with zero, coming in camping for the first time. Just to set the stage, you want to give a rundown of what that trip was and kind of,
For those that are not familiar with the class, it's a class that's built originally for students that are interested in working in or learning more about the outdoor and outdoor recreation media enterprise. So students that have an interest in maybe telling documentary stories or commercial stories for companies like REI, Patagonia, all the way down to smaller businesses as well, or maybe working for the parks systems at whatever level that might be. So the class is geared towards that type of media storytelling, production, administration, etc. And it's an extremely hands-on. We call it a transformative learning experience. It's immersive. There's no real classroom experience. There's like a traditional one. We don't sit in seats somewhere and have lectures and stuff like that. We orient the class around a spring break long bike packing expedition in the backcountry, wherever that may be. And so last year, when you joined us, we went to Big Bend Ranch State Park, which is my favorite place to bike pack, and is one of my favorite places to ride in the world. And it's the perfect. I hate even objectifying it like this, but it's the perfect laboratory for this class, because we go out for 5 to 6 days in the backcountry, self-sufficient on bikes. And you are truly out there. And you've been down there several times. Some of your listeners have been down there. You are truly out there. Like it's you know, the medical
This isn't
resources.
your beginner bikepacking class.
No, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, you are out in the middle of the desert, and what is the closest ambulance or closest hospital, like 6 hours away or something?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the middle of the park, you're looking at a 6 hour wait time probably for somebody to get to you. I'm sure they're a little bit quicker, but and that's why we carry a spot with us, and we take people that are wilderness first responder trained, and then we also take a number of support or people in support of the class that have quite a bit of experience bikepacking and in the backcountry to help just again kind of support and consult the students that are pretty fresh to it all along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's to the point where when I first heard what you were, was it 16 students?
Last year we took 16, I believe. Yeah.
So 16 students, some of which had never camped in their entire lives, one of which learned to ride a bike for this trip. I mean, it's borderline crazy.
Oh yeah, no, it's risky, but I think that's an important thing for the students to realize and to also see, is that there is real inherent risk, not only in taking the class, but in doing these types of jobs. We give them assignments that reflect the professional production that they would get into when they're on the payroll, if you will. And with those assignments in this particular genre, it can be risky sometimes, and that risk manifests itself in a number of different ways. Physically, for those that are riding the trailway, I don't care how experienced you are. I mean, this place is a tough place to bike, and then just also the risk in taking this task on and being a part of this kind of mechanism that moves through the desert as a whole.
Yeah, well, I mean, I learned so much from that trip. God, I mean, even that you're capable of doing that, you particularly being able to put on something like that and giving them that opportunity. But what I saw was, I mean, so much. I mean, one, people who are just really determined to be there and make the most of it and enjoy the experience, regardless of the fact that most of them didn't have all the best gear. Some of them were carrying 60 pounds of weight on their back and nothing on their bike. We had mechanicals. We had people flipping over their bars and chewing through their lips. And we had one thing that I really took away is you do not baby them at all. I mean, it's a crash course in what a job like this would be like. And listening to you now, it makes sense. If you take a job for Patagonia, you need to be able to take care of yourself and be able to, figure some stuff out. There's not going to be someone that's just going to bail you out. So is there a component of that, I guess?
Oh yeah. I mean, they need to expect it to be a challenge in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
And I think now that the class has run several years and it's gotten a little bit of attention, but word of mouth is still the strongest thing around it. It's students that apply, because you have to apply and interview for the class now. Students that apply, like, they know it's going to be different, like way different than any other class that they've ever been in, probably. And yeah, that's and I think they know that the especially the physical risk and the fact that you're not simply holding their hands the whole way is a
Yeah.
part of it. Now, all that being said, we never take students to a place that we think will be a complete disaster for them. We need them to feel pushed. We need them to feel challenged, because that has to come on top of the actual professional work that they're producing down there, right? They have to experience what you and I would experience if we went to go cover an event or do a commercial job for somebody. But we never put them in untested waters, if you will. So we
Right.
I know Big Bend Ranch State Park pretty well, and have had a lot of conversations with folks like you and Ryan and other rangers down there, other people that have experienced it, and I've spent a lot of time in the backcountry there, on bikes, so on and so forth. So I know where to slow the group. I know where
Mm-hmm.
to suggest things on how to take the trail, but also I know where to tell people, hey, this is a great shot, or you might think about interviewing somebody about this particular um, activity that y'all involved in right over there, or something like that. But we know what we're getting into. We always scout these places. Last year, Simon Parmley, one of the former students of the class, who's now working for our college as a marketing guy, he's always been involved with the class, and he and I went on a scouting trip to look at the monumental loop in New Mexico, Las Cruces, because
Oh yeah.
we were really interested in doing it, and I think in the future we'll still do a part of it, but we were interested in a particular section of it that seemed to have the most water, because when you move that many people through a space, you need to make sure you can find water.
Yeah.
And uh, and we got down there, and we started riding, and our goal was to ride 100 miles in 2 days. Topographically, if you look at the map, if check out bikepacking.com's write up on it, the northern loop, we thought we should be able to do that just fine. We'll be able to scout and determine how the students, where they need to camp, where we need to water up, so on and so forth. And it I even talked to folks involved with the development of that course. Matt was a really, really great resource.
It's just Matt for the most part, right?
Yeah, I believe so. And I feel bad because this year we ended up deciding not to go out there based on the experience that myself and Simon, so two relatively experienced mountain bikers, had with the students in mind. If it was just us two going out there to bike, it would have been, it was a great trip. But
Yeah.
we set out to do 50 miles a day, and I think we got 29 miles in the first day.
Oh.
And again, part of that is just thinking about where the students would be, but also the terrain is really challenging, and not technically challenging like Big Bend is at times, but challenging in duration. And so the first 40 miles are really, really tough of that northern loop if you start in Hatch. And so we just ultimately decided, again, it was unfortunate because I think at some point we will work with Matt out there at some point, but we just got to thinking, like, I don't think the students would be up for that challenge the way we typically train them to ride leading up to spring break. And so we decided not to do that one, really just uh, in regard to the safety of the student, but also just their general experience. It's one thing for it to be hard, but I think it would have taken another level of mountain biker to enjoy and get out of the class what they would need to get out of it if we'd have went and
Right.
did the northern loop at
You're
least.
looking for like
Yeah.
a balance of challenging, but obviously they need to be productive
Yeah.
and some reward at the end, hopefully.
Yeah. And now that
Yeah.
being said, I'm not poo-pooing the Monumental Loop. It is a
Oh, no.
fantastic place to go bike pack and mountain bike. It is incredible. The views are awesome. If you like a real challenge, and I think Matt's very upfront about this, if you want a real challenge, it is the place to go. And it's
Yeah.
awesome. Las Cruces is awesome. Hatch, but Truth or Consequences, that whole stretch is super. It just the Northern Loop, the spot we had time to check out, it just wasn't going to be for the students.
Yeah, I mean, taking 16 kids, or sorry, young adults into a desert or a harsh environment is completely a different thing than just going out with your buddy and going to go for a ride.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on one other thing about your class that I really noticed and enjoyed was, I mean, it's hard to really put into words, but there's a couple things. One is whenever they were put into that environment, I saw, strangers become friends and friends become a community. And everybody really, everything went really well. I mean, there's a couple hiccups here and there, but I saw everybody really congregate together and work together very well. And it was really nice to see. And it happened naturally. It wasn't you directing it to happen. It was just, I think, the realization of being where we were and the importance of safety and also enjoying it and all that stuff. I mean, I just saw a lot of really positive benefits of them, like really coming together as a group that I really enjoyed. And the other thing that I saw was people's lives, I feel like, really changed as a result of being in that environment and connecting with nature and doing something hard, and at the end of the day getting just a supreme victory or a sense of accomplishment. Day 3 really or night 3 really stands out to me. That sunset that we saw at Chora Vista was one of my personal best experiences I've ever had in my life. And many of us were on the same page. I saw people crying and I mean, out of joy and just happiness. And I guess I just was curious to hear some of your thoughts on what it's been like watching people transform, not with their photography, but as people, as they get immersed in this type of activity, maybe for the first time or whatnot.
Yeah, well, I think that's the most important thing to see. We have learning objectives for the course, but ultimately, my favorite thing to see, and the thing that I hope people walk away with, is a sense of transformation. And it sounds kind of cliche and maybe even heady to really kind of talk about it in those terms, but it is truly what happens. And I hope a lot of folks, especially a lot of your listeners, have had these kinds of experiences themselves, where they could point to the time in their life where their lives changed around whatever it might be. And I think that happens for a lot, and I hope it happens for all of the students in classes like this. You pointed out that evening where we had that outstanding sunset. I actually think that was night 4. You're
right.
But
no, you're right. That's night 4.
But that came after 2 really hard days on the trail. That came after the El Solitario, which is always tough, and I don't care who you are. And then it came the next day after making those big hike-a-bikes out of Sauceda and up to Chora Vista. And I've actually only seen one person ride those entire things. And so I tell students all the time, it's like, I want y'all to try that, but don't be ashamed if you have to get off your bike and push it, because at that point, a lot of them have been pushing some of the climbs anyways. But it came after 2 days, and they really had been kind of beat up to that point, and we were camped at a site with no water, so they've been carrying loads of water with them for the past few miles, the last water spot. And we get to camp, and people are pretty tired, but at the same time they're still pretty energized because we got to camp a little early. And then and then that sunset happens, and then it's just like ultimate payoff. And what happens in that moment, hopefully, is that, yes, they're kind of entertained because there's a performance to the sky out there, but that's when things really start to click for them. Like, look, this is why we came out here.
Yeah.
This is why we're working so hard to produce materials that promote this type of activity, but also promote the stewardship and conservation of these places, getting to know places like this. And that's a huge moment for me as an instructor. Hopefully it's just as big or even bigger for them, because I had the same experience whenever I took a 15-day field course that I now teach, but I took it with Wyman Menzer, who then later became my mentor. I just remember those 15 days as being, it just turned my life in a different direction. I paid a lot more attention to not only what I wanted to do professionally, but also where I wanted to do it and what I was doing it around. And so I think you start seeing mindsets change, life goals start to become maybe less rigid, or maybe even more rigid about where these students want to go and what they want to do with their lives, both personally and professionally. Trish Nag, you mentioned her earlier. I mean, she's a really great example. I mean, she's one of those students that had zero camping experience, zero backcountry experience. Her first night of camping was on our shakedown ride that we do to Caprock Canyon State Park, and it was 7 degrees outside. I mean, it was super cold. But she camped. She spent a few hours, I think, in the restroom, trying to just get warm, and then rode back, that 30 some odd miles the next day in sub-freezing temperatures. I mean, but she still came into the Big Bend trip just headfirst into it, and just had this massively transformational experience now, to where she wants to take her trajectory as a computer scientist and find out how to make that work in being an advocate for the outdoor industry and being active outdoors, and not only being active outdoors, but being an advocate for females being active outdoors, the less represented, and so
her story. It's not fair to just pick out one person, but we don't have 5 hours to talk, because honestly, there was I was inspired by every single person there. But
absolutely, we could talk about every one of them.
Yeah. But Trish did stand out to me. Number one, she's like 90 pounds soaking wet, and I never saw her not smiling.
Yep.
And it was the first time she had ever been camping, and if I remember correctly, she had to get some. Her family was actually pretty against her participating, and I think her parents had to like talk to you, and you had to like reassure them that it was going to be okay. Am I getting this right?
I can't remember if they contacted me, but I did answer some questions for her to take back to her parents, and
okay.
I really think her parents were just at first concerned why she didn't want to come home that spring break and spend time with them. And do this thing that I'm assuming they just knew that they knew she didn't have any experience with to begin with. But the one of the cool things she told me later in the year was that when she did go home and visit with her family, at some point they were wondering when they could go with her to do this kind of stuff.
Oh.
And so I mean that to me is pretty cool. It's one thing
ding.
One thing to take kids, your children camping. It's another thing to take your parents camping.
I love it, man.
And I think I'm so proud of her. And there's people in this class are very. And she's a non-traditional student for this class. She's not a media student, so she took it for the honors credit, and now she's finding ways to have it impact her professional and personal movement forward. Then you got students like Tanner Fowler and Madison Walker who are traditional media production students, who I think really kind of saw their future wrapped up in sports media production. They're both extremely talented sports media professionals. I mean, they belong to a team of students that have recreated the look of Texas Tech athletics for the world, and yet they take this class, and now they see there's much more opportunity than just thinking about stick and ball sports as part of their professional portfolio and their movement forward. And both of them expressed interest in especially non-traditional sports for the U.S. Coverage like that, but also telling stories around it and how those kinds of things, these kinds of experiences impact people, just like we've been talking about today. So there's two more examples.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, we could talk about every single one of them.
It's not fair to just, I know, but a shout out to everybody who was on that trip, because I was blown away by everybody who participated, and equally, if not more so, blown away by you, by the efforts that you take and the passion with which you carry them out. You like to use the word doer, and you, my friend, are a doer. You are truly inspiring and changing lives, and then it's having a real impact. They're not just words that you're saying. People's lives are changed by the actions that you're taking, both as a father to your own kids, and then later on in life, whenever you get them a little bit older, not your kids but other people's kids, and giving them a taste of all that. So
I appreciate it.
Man, you're awesome. I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of those perspectives with us.
Oh yeah.
I could truly talk to you all day, but I know we have things to do. We have to be a dad.
Yep. Got to go make lunch. Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your support of the class and the program, and of me and my activities. I think it's because of people like you that make that class really, really special for the students in other ways too, because your presence there, Brandon Weaver's presence there, Simon, Justin Rex, my brother Seth, I mean, Anna Claire Beasley, them being a part of that class helps the students see that this type of work, on top of this type of lifestyle, is a very viable thing that brings a lot of satisfaction to people and to communities all around the world. And so I appreciate your willingness to be a part of it all.
All right, buddy. Well, it's been a pleasure. Keep doing what you're doing, and look forward to the next time we get a chance to talk.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Take care.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks again to Jerod for taking the time. It's always a privilege to get to talk to him and glean from his knowledge and his experience, both with his own children and family, all the way to his students at the university. Hope everybody is doing well, staying safe. We're still in lockdown. But at least where I'm at, we are still allowed to ride bikes. So, if appropriate, if done so within the guidelines, if you are super safe and wearing a mask, gloves, a face shield, if you do all those things, then go ride your damn bike.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends, or you could be alone. You ride for a day, or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes.